folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanson, Gianna Amato with another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today's guest is Nathan Atkins. Nathan Atkins is a candidate for North Las Vegas mayor. But before we get to Nathan, Gianna, have any rants?
Not today. I will once we start going, but I'll hold off.
I love it.
You're gonna hold off, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't have anything. Let me think. No, not so much. I want to go back right to Nathan. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure.
Could you give us a bio and a point of contact?
So my bio is pretty simple. I've been here in the Valley 8 years. I came here to open a business, franchise, sold the license, worked for CenturyLink for quite some time. Industry I've been in for well over 20 years. At that point, I parted ways with them in COVID, worked for another competitive carrier. We're opening a couple businesses now. We bought some more franchise licenses, and easy point of contact, right? I decided that the town I've lived in ever since I've lived in this area, ever since my family's lived here actually, since the early 90s, is a town I'd like to see make some changes and do some things differently. So they can contact me at Atkins, Atkins, for NLV.com. That's the easiest way to get me.
So you're running for North Las Vegas mayor.
Correct.
What makes you qualified?
Great question. So what makes me qualified is when I think about cities, municipalities, right? They're no different than businesses. Sure, I'm well aware that you vote in people, so there's an element of politics. But the truth is a municipality is run by things like, did you pick up my garbage? Do my street lights work? How does my city function? And that's how companies function. So I was an executive at companies like AT&T. I've run businesses before. I've been a leader in the military. So for me, I look at it different than some of the other political positions, which are more about laws and policies. This is more about application. And application I know very well. So I know how to run a staff. I know how to run a budget. I know how to make things work.
Well, tell us about your military career, because there is, as far as my memory concerns, there's no veteran sitting on the North Las Vegas City Council. So that right there is unique.
You might be right about that.
So why don't you tell us about your military career?
Yeah, so career is a stretch. I served 2 terms. So my family's always been in the military, long-standing service career, right? Going all the way back to my great-grandfather, my great-uncles, right? But when the time came, my mother wanted me to go to college, obviously. My oldest brother had gone to Northwestern. My other brother decided not to go to college and join the Marine Corps, and I decided that I was going to disappoint my mother. I was going to show her I wasn't going to go to college. So then I said, hey, I'm joining the Army. And she said, you are? I said, yeah, what do you think about that? And she put her checkbook away and said, I think that's great. Now, this just goes to show you how stupid I was at 17, right? I thought I was hurting her feelings. Man, she put her checkbook up thinking, I just dodged a bullet on this clown, and he's probably going to grow up when he's out there. And she was right. So I spent 8 years in the Army. I went in to learn how to fix helicopter engines. You don't know much about the Army, but the Army is you do what we say, not what your so-called contract says you'll do. So I was surplused in that field, and since I was surplused in that field, they reallocated me like they would any other line item to different jobs. And so throughout the first 5 years or so, I spent doing whatever it is they sent me temporary duty to do. I got a lot of OJT experience. But then after Desert Storm, Desert Shield, I had re-enlisted beforehand, but after that, I was able to go to school for my new job, which was food inspection specialist. I had a sergeant that said, hey man, you ever know who these people are? And I was like, no, I never even heard of that job. He was like, exactly, that's the job you want. And I got that job, and it was a good job. I went to Washington, D.C. I was stationed at Walter Reed. I worked at a civilian supply point in Landover, Maryland. I lived at the Air Force Base. By the way, shout out to all my Air Force veterans. You guys do live a damn good life, so I can say damn on the program, okay. So.
Hey, Gianna, you know that the special co-host can't get on his phone and start texting.
No, I'm not texting. I'm actually writing. I'm keeping notes.
He's note-taking. Oh, wait. Hold on. I didn't know this was on the record.
Do you know the history of North Las Vegas?
when you say, do I know the history, that's a pretty loaded question. So is there something specific we're talking about, or you just talking about the generic history of North Las Vegas?
How it was formed, when it became a municipality, how they started with their police force, how the city council came about, how the mayorship came about. Because the North Las Vegas City Council picks the police chief, picks the city manager, it picks the city attorney, all that.
So I'm aware of the functionality of what they do today, right? Historically, though, when it was incorporated and how it was incorporated and why it was incorporated. Briefly, do I have it to memory? Not really. I couldn't give you dates and times. I know they've had a female mayor once before, and that was quite some time ago, I think in the 50s. She was the first and only. Not first and only, but Sherry Buck was a mayor as well, but she was the first, and that was way back in the 50s. I'm familiar with a lot of history as far as people's thoughts of what North Las Vegas is and who, inhabited North Las Vegas and why it's considered to be, in some minds around the valley, for lack of a better term, a stepchild of the rest of the cities in the valley. So I'm familiar with that history, but as far as functionality, sure, I'm very aware of the functionality. It's very clear to me that you have a city council, you have a mayor. A mayor is not a dictator in the city of North Las Vegas. He is or she is but one vote. So each one of the council members have a vote and the mayor has a vote. So there's 5 votes. So you have an odd number, obviously, so you can come to some sort of decision. I know they only select the lawyer and the city manager, and then their responsibility is to keep the city legal and to run the city appropriately, right? Even though that being the case, right, I think that any leader should be mindful of what's being done, right? There's an old saying in the world, I've been in sales and sales operations for a long time, so you inspect what you expect. So just because you select somebody, that doesn't mean you kind of fall asleep at the wheel, right? You should be inspecting on a pretty frequent basis. Even though you don't get direct input, I think there's impact when city council and mayor pay attention to what's going on in the city.
Gianna? And by the way, the show's taped, so you don't have to take notes.
So it's not that I'm taking notes, but I got some questions, right?
Sure,
so basically, whenever when he's talking, I like listening, seeing what you're talking about. That way, I got some questions about that. One of the quotes. So one of the quotes you were saying, right? Because I didn't.
Well, remember,
I actually left my
Gianno,
notes.
I'm a young unknown candidate. Softball questions only, my friend. Come on, make it easy.
Well,
Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me.
I'm not known for softball questions. So, anyways, one of the things you just said, right? So you want to run the city appropriately. Mm-hmm. What power would the North Las Vegas mayor have? Like, what power would you have? Who would the mayor have? I don't want to say power over, but yeah, basically, who would you have power over?
So that's a very unique question, and the term power is a pretty interesting way to put it, right? So if you think about it from a formalized process, the power is selecting the chief of police, selecting the city manager, selecting the city attorney. So if you're talking about direct power, that probably limits the power the mayor has. That's the direct power. The indirect power, though, however, is probably the most important power that any leader has, and that is all the things that make the city thrive. The way the city is structured right now, we're growing. Hats off to Mayor Lee for doing a very good job. City was financially in trouble, and there's no denying that fact. There's plenty of articles from Reuters to Bloomberg to everywhere talking about this city, right? And I have opinions as to why maybe the city didn't end up in what we would consider a receivership like we would in most other states, and I won't stress those opinions because that's all they are, is opinions. But the truth is, right, the mayor's done a good job, the city's back on its feet and stable, and we've seen a lot of growth. I think there can be better structure behind that growth. And I think when we talk about power, that indirect power, it's the influence of, I'll give you a better example. If I look at the city of Henderson, when I showed up to this town, I had a lot of people say things to me that I thought were not necessarily derogatory, but they were a little off the mark, right? We were going to meet to go somewhere for food because I was trying to meet a lot of people, and they says, hey, meet us down in Hendertucky. Well, I kind of figured out what they meant right away just by Hendertucky, because in general across the United States, we like to make fun of the state of Kentucky and southern states in general, right? But that was a very common theme, right? Now, unless you lived in somewhere specific like Green Valley or Anthem, the places that people consider higher end places, they considered Henderson, Hendertucky. But look at Henderson. Henderson made a conscious decision, right, to change their course. And now people talk about it as one of the best places to live, one of the safest places to live, one of the nicest places to live. It's ranked across the nation as a great city. North Las Vegas has the same potential. We don't have to just do good or good enough, right? We can do great. But to do that, you have to have a leader who has a vision, a plan, and then willing to implement that plan. And the only way you can implement it is empower people to go out and exercise and execute that plan. You don't have direct power to make them do it. So you have to be able to influence them to see the value of the vision and go out and make it happen. The people are going to make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. So it's good that you bring up Henderson, right? So I'm originally from Henderson.
Okay.
And it's great that you're going for the mayor of North Las Vegas.
I like to think so, yeah.
Yeah. Now the thing about it is, we were talking about earlier about ruffling feathers, right? Mm-hmm. Would you being a mayor, being a candidate, and if you become the mayor, have an issue with ruffling, the wrong feathers?
So again, that's an interesting question. I'll say this: when I become the mayor, because if is not a strategy for me, ruffling feathers. I guess I don't deem things to be ruffling feathers if you're doing what's supposed to be done.
If you're following the law, right?
Well, it's not even so much the law, right? Because a lot of times in business, and you got to remember, like I said to you before, a municipality in my mind is very much like business, right? Residents care. If your street light goes out by your house, you don't like that. Your street's dark, you're concerned, you want your street light fixed. 2 weeks later, if your light's back on, your city works. 6 months later, if your light's still out, your city's not working. Your garbage isn't getting picked up, things aren't happening, right? So it's a business, and in business, yes, there are laws that you have to abide by, but a lot of what you do isn't always necessarily legal based as it is what's going to be beneficial to the city, right? So ruffling feathers, if I'm making a decision that I believe is the right decision and you take exception with it, then I guess the conversation needs to be, what are you taking exception with it for? And is what you're taking exception with my decision good for everyone if I don't do what you're asking me not to do or asking me to do? Or is it only good for you and a small group of people? So I don't really think about ruffling feathers. I think about what are we talking about and who does it ultimately benefit?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I totally agree. I understand what you're saying, right? Now, earlier you also said, you mentioned that, unless I heard you wrong, if you were to become the mayor, right? When you become the mayor.
I like that one. Yeah.
Okay, so when you become the mayor, you also said you'll be able to pick the chief of police, right? And the DA, or did I hear you incorrect?
I don't know about the DA, but I know chief of police is selected by the mayor.
The city attorney.
So,
The city
attorney, city
okay.
manager. City manager, city attorney, chief of police.
Okay, great. So with you being able to pick the city attorney and the chief of police, what would you be looking for, right? Like, would you be looking for well, you bring up Henderson earlier, and they ousted the chief of police there a few years back, right? Because she came in, and I forget her name, but anyway, she came in, Watson. Okay, so Watson was her name. She came in basically making changes, right? She was doing what was right. She was following the law. Police officers didn't like that, right? So they all teamed up against her, and they ousted her. Okay. So, I mean, with you looking for a chief of police, what would you be looking for in a candidate? Would you allow the police, right? Would you allow somebody like that? Would you allow the police officers to oust somebody that's following the law?
So that's a really interesting question. So I don't know about, allow or not allow, but what I'll say is this. First, I'm not looking to select anyone because I don't know what the structure is at the moment. So before I make any moves or do anything, I like to take control, right? Meaning be implemented into the position. And then I like to evaluate and observe what's going on, right? Bring me the information, right? Where are we at? What's our objective? How have we performed to that objective, right? And then observe for a bit of time what's actually going on. Because if you're listening to what someone tells you before you get an opportunity to see the information or evaluate the information, right, you're making a bad choice. So there may not be anyone who needs to be replaced. They may all be doing a great job and a fine job, right? The vision may be the issue, right? And I'm a firm believer that I think the vision is the issue. I think leadership has been kind of limited and hampered by some of the decisions they make based on what you asked earlier, which is history. Historically, this is good enough for where we're at. Historically, we're doing great with just these good choices. We're not looking for great. We're not looking for the best. This is the city of North Las Vegas. Good choices. We just need to be back on our feet. Steady as the course goes. This is good enough, right? I don't believe in that, though. I believe that if you're willing to see beyond the limits and you're willing to put that vision out there, put a good plan behind it, motivate people to want to achieve it, right? You can get it done. So if I had to replace people, then that's another thing. It's going to be an evaluation based on why. And there would be a reasoning behind why. If they're not performing at the level they need to be performing at, or if I don't think they're capable of getting the job done and getting us to the next level, then we would make that decision. So would I let the police oust the police chief, which is the question you actually asked me? I don't know, because I don't know what happened in Henderson to be able to make that decision. So if there's a valid reason for the police chief needing to be removed and the officers stand behind that reason and that reason is valid and logical and it's good for the city, well, then that's something we should consider, right? We shouldn't just dismiss it because we feel like, hey, the police shouldn't have it out for their top boss, right? Yeah. But at the same time, we also shouldn't dismiss the police officers if the top boss really does need to be replaced.
Yeah. Now, what about a police officer, right? And this is the reason I asked that last question is if you had a police officer, you had a chief of police, right? Let's say you had a police officer that goes and he beats up somebody, right? A minority, or don't even have to be a minority. He beats somebody up and he turns his camera off, right? And all of his buddies vouch for him. But then there was one camera left on and, you being the mayor, everybody, right? It exploded, everybody sees it. It's on, Facebook Live, whatever it is, okay? Everybody sees it. With that police chief, for them to not allow the video to be shown, what would you do? I mean, would you dismiss somebody like that? Would you allow, that's the problem here, right? You've seen all, these last couple of years with the corruption, okay? All the corruption that went on, that stuff went on for a reason, right? People don't like being killed, right? People want to live. People want to go back to their families. What would you do if a police chief were to hide cameras, okay? Were to hide video cameras of citizens getting beat up, citizens getting falsely arrested, or citizens getting killed? Do you believe those videos, first of all, should come out within 24 hours, or do you believe that they should be allowed to hide them videos? Where's your thought? What's your thought on that?
Oh, you invited me for the video conversation. That's a tough one. So here's what I'll say.
I don't know what Gianna's going to ask.
Here's what I'll say, right? And I'll say this because let's be ultimately clear. I'm stepping on that, sorry. Let's be ultimately clear, right? I am ex-military, right? And military means exactly that. No matter how much you want to pretend you're not, you're still conditioned the way you were trained. And so I'm trained in process. So what's the process? What's the protocol? What's the procedure? And if we don't have one, then the question is, why don't we have one? And let's create one. And what makes the most sense? So whether or not I turn over, which I don't really get to control, so let's be clear about that. Again, we know what my powers are. But whether or not I influence the turning over of information within 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours, if it's done through this medium or this process or this way, is going to be dictated by the standard operating procedure. Are we following the standard operating procedure? If we're following protocols, then we're following protocols. And I'll stand behind anybody who's following the protocol. And if the protocol is broken, then we need to get together. And this isn't one of those things about, oh, we'll create a committee around it and we'll talk about it till the cows come home but never change anything. We legitimately sit down and go, listen, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't working. Let's figure out a better way. Let's pull in the right people. Let's get it done. But to answer your question, the answer is simply this. What's the process and procedure? If the process is you always keep your body cam on and you don't have your body cam on, well, then you need to be counseled and coached. And I don't know what the process is, because now we're talking about a bargain for employee. And so for most people who don't know what bargain for generally is, that's a union employee. Unions are just simply people who bargain for other people's labor, right? We see executives of major Fortune 500 companies all bargain for. And I am known for telling people, I don't necessarily know if union is a good thing or a bad thing, the right thing or the wrong thing. That I can't speak to, because I just don't know. It's up to the individual who has to take the job and work. I have worked for many years, 20 plus years, never been union, right? But I've been fortunate that I have specific skill sets that pay me pretty well. But I've been let go. I've been walked to the door like anybody else, even when I'm making great money. I've been let go even when I'm producing and performing, because, well, the company needs to make some adjustments and shifts, and it happens. I've just been fortunate enough to be picked back up somewhere else, to be able to do something else, right? But bargain for is a good solution, because if it wasn't a good solution, then every corporate executive of every major corporation wouldn't have a bargain for contract. They want their people to be at will. They want their people to be right to work, but none of them want to work under that process. They all have a bargain for contract. So there has to be value in bargain for, or else these folks at the very top, the handful of them, wouldn't all demand bargain for contracts when they work. They'd work at will. They'd work right to work, right? So process, protocol, procedure, we'd follow that.
What would be your protocol? If you were to make a new protocol from, let's say, the protocol, because apparently it ain't working. I know you heard about the North Las Vegas Police Department, the Henderson, I'm sure. You know, they got, they're pretty rough, right? We had a few candidates last year that came in. One of them used to be a police officer in North Las Vegas, and he told us directly on Facebook Live, the first day he got there, they were beating the hell out of, people, and I don't know if it was his sergeant, walked up to him right afterwards on his first day at work after they just beat somebody up, shook his hand and said, "Welcome to North Las Vegas." Would you want North Las Vegas to be known for beating people up?
So again, my family's lived there since the early 90s. I've been there since 2013. And in the time that I've lived in North Las Vegas, I can tell you I've never been beat up. Actually, I've never even been pulled over. That isn't to dismiss bad behavior. So in any organization, you have people who don't do their jobs appropriately. And those people should be singled out, and they should be reprimanded, whatever that process is. And so, yes, I think we're all a little frustrated because we realize that sometimes in some of these positions, bargain for employees, like police officers, have a very strong support system that kind of handcuffs leadership from doing certain things when they step what we consider to be too far out of line. But I don't know if that's the structure of the North Las Vegas Police Department. From my experience, I can say it's not. Matter of fact, on my way driving over here, I saw a police cruiser sitting with its lights on as I was coming up Ann Road. And I was like, oh, must have pulled one over, right? And as I get closer, you know what they were doing? They were parked under a tree branch that had fallen in the road. And so they were there until somebody from the city was going to come and cut it so nobody got their cars messed up. Yeah. Sometimes we have a perception about the police that isn't accurate. My first perception was, probably pulled somebody over, somebody was speeding, they got it. And what happened was he was just parked in front of the tree branch that was hanging down in front of the road. Yeah. So again, what policies and protocols and procedures would I put into place? I have no idea, right? I have no idea. And I'm not gonna say I'm gonna create ideas because, oh man, I read all this information about what happened in the past, or I read all this information about what's going on, right? What I'll tell you as a leader is this. And I'll give you a good example of it. I worked for a company called Coverall, which is a commercial cleaning organization. I ran 3 cities, Cleveland, Detroit, and Pittsburgh. Not my favorite places in the world when I left Chicago, but that's what I got. So I spent 187 days a year on the road, and I swung between those 3 cities all the time. And I had a vision for how I was going to structure the sales leaders and the sales team in the city of Pittsburgh. Had it up on the map. When I was in Chicago, I drew it all out. I had a game plan, wrote it down to them, and told them to get it implemented. And then as I came to town at least once a month, I wanted to see how they were implementing it. And we would go out, and we would go out, and we would go out. And they weren't finding success, and they weren't implementing it very well. And then one day, I recognized while I was out with just the sales rep, not the managers, right? But with the sales rep. And I said, great, where's our next appointment? And they said, oh, it's over such and such and so-and-so. And I looked across the water, because there are 3 rivers that run through Pittsburgh. And I go, oh, that place right there. Yeah, he goes, yeah. I was like, oh, we should be there in no time. He was like, no, it'll take 20 minutes to get there. And I was like, well, why will it take 20 minutes to get? It's right there. He's like, yeah, but we got to drive way down there, because it's the only place we can catch the bridge that'll take us to the other side of the river, and then we'll have to make it back. And we have to make it back around and over and in. And it was at that moment that I realized that great plan I had prior to going to Pittsburgh, right? Oh, actually, I've been to Pittsburgh many times. Prior to immersing myself in Pittsburgh and getting out in the field enough and making sure I saw what actually is happening, I learned that was the dumbest plan that was ever created. Some idiot in Chicago thought he could pull up a map on Google and figure out how to do business in Pittsburgh and how to structure his team and make his team work. So what he did when he came home that day from the field of actually being boots on the ground and seeing what was happening, grabbed the first thing he could, cleaned off the board, gathered his team and said, we're going to restructure how we do territories. We're going to restructure how we do everything. And we're going to figure out what's the best way to make things happen. By the way, you've lived in this town your whole entire life. I need you to take point person and I need you to talk me through what makes sense and how we can get around. And that's when the sales in that town picked up. And the sales in that town weren't good, not because the people weren't good. Right? It was the idiot leader out of Chicago who wasn't good, who didn't take the time to do the due diligence, who didn't come to the specific market and learn the value of it. What I learned coming here was people told me, listen, you can't do business here like you did in Chicago, like you did in Dallas, like you did in LA, like you did in Miami. Vegas is a different place. And I would acknowledge them and go, yeah. Every place is different, right? But it wasn't until I truly started trying to open up the very first Orange Theory Fitness here, and I started meeting people here, and I started getting a real understanding of, man, people, there is like a dividing line. I live in Henderson. I don't drive to Summerlin. I live in Summerlin. I don't drive to Henderson. Forget that. That's an easy thing to find out. The hardest thing to find out is Jesus Christ, you won't drive 12 minutes down the road. I talked to a young lady, and she's like, oh, my God, I love the concept. Can't wait till you open one by me. And I was like, by you? Didn't you say you lived? Yeah, isn't that? Yeah. You're serious, yeah. Right? So my thing is you have to figure out what it is you're actually getting involved in and what's actually going on to the best of your ability before you come in. I shouldn't say you have to. You shouldn't, right? That's my opinion. You shouldn't make these decisions. You shouldn't be predisposed to believe all these things day one walking in the door. Walk in the door, meet your people, get to understand what's going on. Look through the files and records, right? Find out how many reports there have been of issues, right? And then start talking to the people. Any mayor, in my opinion, that doesn't take some time and go on a ride along with a police officer, a patrol person, right? A sergeant at different levels, doesn't spend a day in the life of and see what they're actually doing, that's when you're gonna find stuff out. And you've got to make people comfortable enough to talk to you.
Could I stop you right there?
Sure, absolutely.
You would go, as mayor,
yeah,
you'd go on a ride along with a North Las Vegas patrol officer?
Absolutely, why not? Why wouldn't I? Am I not there to serve the people of North Las Vegas?
I've never heard anybody say that before, running for mayor. Ever. So the real reason why I'm running is because I have some opinions about the place I live, and I think that I can do a better job because of my experiences and my background. But the truth is, I think overall, right, the focus isn't always on the residents of a town or the citizens of a town. I think the focus is on very insular things for a candidate, because generally that's how you win. I looked at the election numbers. Didn't take many votes to put the mayor in. Didn't take many votes to put the city council people in. And that is no knock to them. That's a knock to the residents of the town who don't come out and determine that. Because they determine the fate of who goes into that office. So if you don't like who's in there, pick the people you want. But you got to come out and do it. You got to get involved. And so, how would you motivate them?
That's a better question. So I'm trying to work through that right now and understand, how do I reach the people? I'm working with the team. And that team is very versed in telling me.
And what's the population of Darth, Las Vegas? Because it's a nonpartisan seat.
About 261,000 people was about the last count I got from the census, right? Mm-hmm. So it could be anywhere from 239 to 261 in that range as I pulled all the census data, mm-hmm. Right? Nonpartisan, that's a very good point too, because a lot of people ask, what's my affiliation? And I have no problem telling people which jersey I may or may not don. You can change jersey, so does it really matter which jersey you put on? Because today you can be a Republican, tomorrow you can just simply go online and say I'm a Democrat or Libertarian or an Independent or non-listed. Or what matters more than anything is that if you're going to be a leader in a municipality, you should be nonpartisan. Garbage doesn't care what your political affiliation is. It just needs to be picked up.
Right. So North Las Vegas has a very unique history. And
by unique, what do you mean?
well, I'm going to explain.
Okay.
Several years ago, there were two North Las Vegas municipal seats for judge.
Okay.
And one was Catherine Ramsey, the other one was Sean Hofkin. I hope I pronounced his name right. Catherine Ramsey, they wanted to oust her out.
When you say they, who was they?
The powers that be.
Okay.
We just leave it that way.
The dark forces, all right.
I'm a Star Wars fan. They wanted to oust her out by recalling her.
Okay, a recall.
Okay. And they wanted to replace her with the city attorney.
Oh, is that who this other individual was? Was they were currently city attorney, but they were running for the seat?
Okay. Sandra Morgan, I believe her name is.
Okay.
I'm not positive. So they wanted to recall her and have Sandra Morgan run to replace her. Okay. The Supreme Court came back, says you cannot recall a judge.
Okay.
Okay.
There we have it. That's the policy. That's the protocol.
So when Catherine Ramsey's seat expired,
okay,
they got rid of that municipal seat. It's gone. So now they had the one municipal seat. So fast forward. Last election, Chris Lee, who was a justice of the peace with Natalie Terrell and Kalani Hu for the justice of the peace seat.
Okay.
Chris Lee lost his seat to Brenda Harris. I believe that's her name. Mm-hmm. Now she's the judge. So he lost the seat, so he's gone. So they wanted to save Chris Lee, so they appointed him as the second municipal judge for North Las Vegas. So
they reactivated the seat that they deactivated.
Right. So it's a political game, which a lot of people behind the scenes talk about it, but nobody never publicly express their opinion or their criticism of the process. So here you are, you got two municipal seats, you don't like that judge on the seat, so you try to recall her. That failed. Soon as her term expired, you got rid of that department. Gone. Now, fast forward, you have three justices of the peace seats. One of them was up for re-election.
Loses.
That person loses to somebody else, so now you want to save that person, give that person a job maybe. You reinstitute the seat that you said that you never needed to get that person in as a judge. And in my opinion, if you lose an election for judge, you should not be appointed to another judge seat because the people have spoken. So here's the thing. The political game is what pisses me off.
Sure.
You got rid of a seat because you say you don't need it, and then you reinstitute it again. But where's the voice of the people during this whole process? There was no voice of the people to get rid of that municipal seat in the first place.
Sure.
There was no voice of the people to reinstitute that municipal seat.
Right.
So, as mayor, would you play these silly games and have you really taken a look to see if that municipal seat is needed per population to take a look to see if that municipal seat is actually needed in the first place?
Sure. So to answer that question right away, the answer is no, I haven't taken a look at that specific seat. Whether or not I would play the game as the mayor, I think back to my original answer that I gave before, right? I would have to look at things like, what was the reason why the seat was decommissioned and removed, right? So what was the decision behind removing it? Why did we remove it, right? And so that's got to be documented somewhere, right? And how was that decision based? Was it based on what? Was it based on saving money? Was it based on because there wasn't enough court volume? What was the reasoning for it? And was that reason in the best interest of the people, which is what you're supposed to be there for, is to make sure it's in the best interest of the people. Now, I don't want to sit here and pretend like I'm born and raised in Disneyland, right? Not everything is going to be the best and not going to be in the best interest for the people or all people, right? But it should, in general, the majority, right? We shouldn't be doing what's in the best interest of this tiny little small group over here, because that's the group that has power and who we need to curry favor to and all the other things, right? If you want to support me, great. I look for your support, but support me knowing that I'm looking at the broad spectrum of what's going to be in the best interest of everybody, right? Because we can't have you thriving and everyone else not necessarily suffering, but feeding you, right? Because ultimately that doesn't work. The long game doesn't work. So I would have to look at the specifics around why we got rid of the seat. And then I would also have to look at the specifics of, well, why did we bring it back? Because again, we had to make some sort of ruling, some sort of determination, some sort of something as to why bring it back. Now, to your point of if you lose and then be appointed, the optics of all of what you described doesn't look very good. So, but I try to make sure that I don't let optics sway me. And if it's something that I'm trying to find information about, I do my best to shelve my feelings and then start digging into the information and see how I can connect the dots and see what the actual logic says, right? Not my thoughts, not my feelings, not my opinions, but what actually happened, right? And then look at what happened and look at what the reasoning is behind it, and then overlay it and go, well, that really wasn't of value to the people. Or it was, so we should have kept the seat gone. We shouldn't have brought it back. Bringing it back was a bad idea, right? And then I need to know, how do we fix this bad idea if it's a bad idea, right? Or if it was a bad idea to get rid of it and it was a good idea to bring it back, well, I'm glad it's back. That's a good idea. The optics of picking someone is always a bad thing, because there should have been a special election, in my opinion. The people should have, if we're bringing that seat back, there should have been a special election and people should have been allowed to vote. And we should have put new candidates up to run for it, right? And maybe, maybe, what's his name, Chris Lee, John Lee? Chris Lee. Maybe Chris Lee would have won. Lost the first time, because we lose sometimes and then we win sometimes. But to appoint someone in a position that's supposed to be an elected position, I think is always a bad idea, unless we're in the middle of something where we know you happen to unfortunately pass and we just appoint someone temporarily till we get to the place where we can vote. So they're in there for a very temporary short period, right? But to say this elected position is now being filled by an appointed position and not on a temporary basis because we needed to on a temporary basis, I don't think that's the best idea. I think the best idea is always to put it to the people. You know, but I also encourage the people to get involved, right? I'm looking at the election results, I'm looking at the information, and I'm working hard to figure out things like, I have no problem sharing my ideas and information. So one of my ideas is how do I get the people to talk to me? I know what my team's doing. My team tells me who's registered to vote. My team tells me who's the inverted voters, the ones who will vote most of the times or all the time, and they're courting them and all this other stuff, right? And there's a lake, not just a pool, a lake of people over here that nobody's talking to because they don't vote. And I would guess they don't vote because nobody wants to talk to them. And so it's just a vicious cycle. But if you talk to them, because why would they register if they didn't want to vote? Would you register if you didn't want to vote?
No.
Of course, so you want to vote, but you don't want to vote just to vote. You want to vote because you feel your voice is being heard. You want to have a reason to vote. So I'm trying to structure something where I can put out a text number, because I can't run a call center, right? It's just a reality of my limitations. But a text. And residents of North Las Vegas can text their mayor. They can tell me anything they want to tell me, and they can do it anonymously. And they're already doing it because everybody texts every day. So it's not like I'm creating a process where they got to go look it up on a website and try to figure out how to get. No, here you go, text. And you can do it anonymous. And I'd review the text. And if I like the ideas, I'd call you. I'd have to ask who you are and have that conversation. And when I take office, that number would never come down, because I think you should always have easy access to the people who are the leadership in your town. And I think your voice should be heard. Just don't confuse being heard with getting what you want. If you tell me you think everyone in North Las Vegas deserves a free burrito, well, I think that's a great idea, Steve, but I don't know how practical it is for your city leadership to provide it.
Like Bob Bear says, where's the money coming from?
Exactly.
So here's another piece of history in North Las Vegas.
That's what I like about you. You always teach me stuff.
North Las Vegas had, well, now it still have, but it had at the time, a North Las Vegas detention center.
Mm-hmm.
And
closed for a while, right? Financial issues.
it's more than just financial issues.
I read an article or two that talked about something else, but
You had an officer and his partner off duty drunk that went to North Las Vegas detention center, beat the crap out of an inmate,
violated their rights, yeah.
dislocated the socket of his eye or something like that. Anyways, the cameras turn up missing. The video of that thing just turns up missing. All the powers that be, they don't know what's going on. If something like that was to happen on your watch, what would you do?
Great question.
You like that question, huh?
I love that question.
Man, that question puts me right in the crosshairs. You know it. Come on. So what would I do? So here's what I would do. Let me stop. Here's what I believe I would do, right? Because I'll tell you this. Many people pursue something in life, and they always talk about what they would do if they were in charge. And then they get to be in charge. And when they're in charge, they find out, oh, I can't just do what I thought I was going to be able to do, or I can't just whatever, right? So what I would like to believe I would do is I would do what's the right thing. And now that's a very nebulous response, right? When you say the right thing.
For situation
So the
like
right
that.
thing is the appropriate thing is to investigate what's happening. One, the first investigation I think needs to happen is if we have video cameras in place and those cameras were disabled, broken, defective, whatever the reasoning is, we don't seem to have this imagery, so I can determine from seeing it what happened, well, then the first question that needs to be solved is why? And how long have we known about it? And why haven't we done something to fix it? Then, of course, you need to go and do an investigation. You need to sit down with all the people who were firsthand that you can and get them on a signed testimony to tell their account of what happened. And then you have to make a decision based on that. Now, if people testify and they say it happened this way, whether you feel it happened differently or not, you're really powerless to do anything different about it. What you can do, though, is work tirelessly to make sure that we don't have faulty cameras, that we don't have missing data, that we don't put ourselves in a situation where now we have to make an optics call or a judgment call versus making an actual call. And an actual call is when we have facts and we can work off facts. And working off opinions is always a big challenge and in my opinion, a big mistake. So to answer your question, I don't know. I'd have to have been in position. I have to have been behind the scenes and see all the information. Because a lot of times we think we know the information, and we only know the information that's being produced or given to us, right? Now, there are smart people like yourself who know that this is public information, and you will go, and you will scour through that public information, and you will read all that information, testimonies and things that happen and all this other stuff, not just the news articles, right? Very few people will do that, so that's commendable, number one. But number two, it's difficult to say, I would have done based on what? What am I making a decision based on? Based on how I feel. And I can tell you right now how I feel is, I feel dismayed. I feel sickened that someone would go and abuse and beat another human being, irrespective of what they've done.
Especially somebody that holds a badge.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. So if
nothing has happened to that person.
If you know nothing about me, this is one thing I'm very vocal about. So my brother, my older brother, not my oldest brother, is a retired Illinois State Police trooper, right? So I have no problem with law enforcement. My family, love it, great guy. He was a Marine, can't really take his judgment on that one for 8 years, but at least he did something good at the end when he got done, right? So if I didn't make fun of Marines, none of my friends would appreciate me. So.
You got one sitting right here.
Oh, I know. That's why I had to make sure I made fun of it as I look at Semper Fi staring me right in the face. But here's the thing, right? When I make a decision to empower you to be an officer of the law, and let's be clear about what an officer of the law is. That is someone who upholds the law, right? No police officer should ever tell anyone, because I told you so, I am the law. You are not the law. You don't just bark commands. What you should say is, per ordinance, per code. So let's just say it's something like exiting a vehicle. I'm asking you to exit the vehicle because per Nevada statute, blah, 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 blah. Right? I expect to have a professional, well-trained individual who I am giving a significant amount of power to. And let's be clear, the power is there may come a time where you might have to make a decision to take a life. And that is a lot of power. So I need to make sure I have the smartest, brightest, best trained, mentally sound people patrolling the residents of our cities.
And how would you do that?
Oh, well, now you get back into a more important conversation, and that is, what's the hiring practices? How are we hiring? How are we selecting? What's the training processes? What's the follow-on training processes, right? We've all been through a situation where we've learned the job, now we're on the job and we're doing the job, and it's not the way the textbook said. It's a little bit different. But you also have to have follow-up training. You also have to have a lot of stuff. Listen, I could say stuff like, oh, they need more sensitivity training. Well, sensitivity training doesn't really work. I can say that right up front. Sensitivity training is important. It's important to educate people about information. But sensitivity training only works when an individual wants to care about their sensitivity. Because I can't tell you how many times I've gone through these standard trainings where, we have to learn, the appropriate things to do for the company, not to take bribes, not to do this, the appropriate things to do with your coworkers, not to say these type of jokes and not to post this type of material, send these type of emails, right? And most people are just checking the box. They're not there to really learn it. They're going to check the box to get it done. When you have a police force, though, right? Because they're not just making a decision about whether they pack your whatever in a box and ship it to you, or whether they sell a widget to somebody. They're making a decision that could impact life or death, right? These are public safety individuals. So I need to make sure that it's real training, it's structured training, it's interactive training. I need to know who's paying attention and who's not paying attention. And when I say I need to know, I don't mean me specifically. I mean who's ever empowered to run the police department. So the onus would be on the chief of police to make sure the organization is run right. The onus would be on me, though, to inspect what I expect, to sit with that chief of police and ask questions and find out what they're doing. And then you asked me, would I ride with a police officer as a mayor? If I don't go out and see firsthand what's happening, then the chief of police can tell me anything and hand me all kinds of reports. And I can sit back here smugly and go, well, guys, you know what the reports and the reports I received, and I can play that game. And I can hide behind the reports. And when it all goes south, I could cut the police chief loose. Or I could put somebody out there and let them go, right? But the truth is, right, the buck should stop all the way at the top. And all the way at the top is, it's not my job to train the police. It's not my job to manage the police. It's not my job to do that stuff. But it is my job to run the city. And that's a part of running the city. And if it's a part of running the city, then it's my job to make sure I'm checking on the information I'm being given. And if I can't take a little bit of time to do that, then I probably shouldn't have the position. The position's too big for me.
So, the North Las Vegas police chief, I'm glad you brought that up. North Las Vegas has been through a lot of police chiefs over a short span of time.
Sometimes good talent is hard to find.
Okay. Now, Yeah, but when you install that power on somebody, they could screw up decades of good police work.
They can.
Okay, so as mayor, one of your leadership position is to empower and appoint a police chief. Now, doing so, and you talked about training, what would you look for, or what would you want to see in the police academy being taught to candidates that want to have a career in law enforcement, and then when they graduate, they're going to be on the streets of North Las Vegas. And I understand that the police academy is one big academy, and then they people go North Las Vegas Police, Henderson Police, LVMPD. But would you go to the academy and see how they're training these new recruits, and if you don't like something that they're doing, how would you make sure that it's not done, or how would you improve the process?
Okay, I like this question better, actually. So the good thing about that is pretty simple, right? So we have 50 states. And in each one of these states, we have tons of municipalities. We have state police, we have county police, we have city police, we have township police, we have marshals, we have all kinds of stuff and all kinds of academies. We got FBI, we've got federal government. There's a lot to draw from. We got a big well of information to draw from. So first things first, I always try to go, what's similar to what I'm doing? Because I don't want to go look at an apple when what I'm growing is oranges. Growing apples is not a good idea for me, because maybe they need a lot of water, but oranges need less water. So I want to look at oranges. But who's growing oranges, and who's been growing oranges really well? Good crop year over year. Not much in the way of infection, not much in the way of disease, not much in the way of pesticide. Growing a good product, being able to harvest their product properly, and look at their information and go, hey, there's something to mirror. So to answer your question is, if I'm willing to go ride with a police officer, I'm willing to go to the academy and at least talk to them or spend some time with them. I don't know if I have a full day to spend, but whatever I have, it would definitely have to be at least 4 hours. You can't spend time with somebody less than 4 hours. You have to be able to set aside at least half a day at a minimum to go in and spend time with people. When I say spend time, I don't mean like the old days in the military. You had two types of generals, in my opinion. You had generals who called down to their leadership and said, next week I'm gonna be down there and I'm gonna inspect the troops. And all the week prior, clean this up, get that up, everybody, uniforms, I need to see boots, shining, formations, practice. And when they show up, guess what? They see exactly what it is they wanna see. And then they get in their car and they go back home and they go, my battalion, my regiment, my brigade,
Sometimes I think they do that deliberately.
Of course.
So they could
course.
not have anything to report back.
Checks the box, right? And I've also known a couple generals who they come and show up. And they don't come and show up to tear it down. They come and show up just to figure out what it is. I've been a specialist before, and all of a sudden I've had a 3-star general, General Woodmansey, right there. How's it going? Oh, it's going pretty good. And I turn and look, and oh my God, it's the general. Yes, sir. It's going great, sir. Oh, relax. I'm just here to observe it. Didn't announce. My sergeants didn't know. My captains didn't know. My warrant officers didn't know because I was attached to an aviation unit. It was just out there on the flight line because he has access. Hell, all of this is his. He's 5th Corps commander. Good leader, in my opinion. I love General Woodmansey. I actually worked out of his office because he liked me as a soldier and shared some things with me. That's leadership. So if you go to the academy and do those things, all I would be able to do is go, hey, guess what, Steve? Here's something I learned about the academy at blah, 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 blah. Here's some of the things they've implemented. Here's some of the results they've received from it. You think we could do that type of stuff? Again, you don't have direct power. So you got to influence people. Same way I have to try to influence people to vote for me. Same way I have to try to get people to consider me to be the candidate they should choose over all the other candidates. When you're in the job, you don't get to just dictate. City manager, city attorney, chief of police. I mean, there's a limited pool of people who you directly select and tell what to do.
What's your city council?
City council gets voted in. And you sit on the panel and you're but one of those 5 votes. So city council has to vote with you if you want to get something done. You guys got to work together on it, right? And that doesn't mean like, oh, I'll support your kids' Girl Scout cookies if you buy my kids chocolate bars, right? That's not how we should make decisions. Yeah, either you're buying your kids chocolate bars and Girl Scout cookies or you're not, but we shouldn't be back dealing and backroom trading and doing that type of stuff. What we should be doing is going, what's really going to happen? For me, legacy is an important thing, right? Some people think it's vanity. That's fine. But legacy is important. When I leave a position, right, what did I leave behind? Did I make it better? Or was it just a waste of time? I've had jobs where, hey, I got a paycheck, I did my job, and off. I've had positions where I gave a lot more than I ever got paid. I've had positions where I got paid a lot more than I ever gave. It's that type of world we live in, right? But that's what I look at. And especially when you're talking about something as important as being the leader of a municipality of 261,000 people, that's a good sized city, right? So I wouldn't be able to come in with bully tactics or strong arm and tell the commandant of the school, I don't like this, and you need to change it because it's causing these optics over here. But what I would be smart enough to do is find information first that's relevant and valid information, share that information and encourage them to talk with me about it and ask, is there a way for us to implement this? Is there a way for us to start taking this into consideration? Because we're having these issues over here, right? And we need to look for some sort of solution and get agreements on that. They may go, my wife would kill me. Get an agreement on that because agreements is not a word. But the truth is, if they don't agree and they say, everything's fine just the way it is, forget your information. Well, now we have to have a different conversation. We have to put the facts on the table and say, whether you want to agree or don't agree, we're having these problems and we need to reduce these problems by X within a certain period of time. And now I need you to really consider it. And then I would start looking for other ways in which to influence that individual, right? So everybody reports to somebody. And so then I'd have to start working with whomever that person really reports to and saying, these are our problems and these are real. And these are some possible solutions. And I'm not saying we have to take these, but I need your support and help to get something changed.
So we could agree that safety is a huge aspect as far as the job of a mayor. Okay?
Yeah.
How about education? And I understand the mayor is not part of the board of trustee or the board of education or anything like that, but the mayor still has a say in somewhat of a say in the schools in that municipality and could also influence education within its municipality as far as schools and the way we educate the children in North Las Vegas. How would you get involved in the education aspects of North Las Vegas? What would you do to say, so you could say at your State of the City address when you're talking to your constituents and you're giving them the report of the prior year, how would you address the school system within North Las Vegas?
So the school system is an interesting system. I came from a place where you move to the right district with the right taxes, and those taxes fund those schools, and you get a good school, right? So you can maneuver and pick and choose that way. Here we have a consolidated district, right? Whether you move to Summerlin or Green Valley or one of the wealthy places, right, or whether you move to the moderate places or the lower income places, it's all CCSD. And I've had this conversation with people before. They're like, no, over here where we live, the school's bad. It's not about a better school. Maybe they're dealing with less issues, right? Maybe in a lower income community, you have more people where English is a second language. It's difficult for those children to get the support in the home. By the way, right, I'm not saying home is the only solution and answer, but home is an important part of developing children, right? We all know that. So if someone at home can't help them with their homework, and they don't have means and resources to get somebody who can help them with the homework. Now you've got kids in school who don't seem to understand, they're struggling, falling behind, you're spending more time than you are to a school in that same consolidated district where they have more resources, and the kids are getting the support and help they need, and so they can keep pace with the course, or they're ahead of the course, and so that teacher can teach differently because of the circumstance. But it's not because the school is a better school or not a better school, or the school receives better resources from the district, right? Because we don't have that type of structure. So I've lived in that type of structure. It's where I took my son and raised him as a single parent. He went to the second best school in the state of Illinois. He went to the primary best school for education when it came to public school. And I'm a firm public school advocate too. I'm not a big fan of private schools. I'm okay with people having a choice for private school, but I think public school should be good. So what I would say is, one, work with the school board. How can I help you? How can I assist you? These possibly are the levers that I can pull, right? And how can I be a part of it? Again, I can't make a determination. I can't dictate what can and can't happen. Now, what I see the city doing is they've created a program. I think it's called SUMU or SUNU or something like that, SMUN or something. They took federal money because of COVID, and they created this program, and they're going to start a kindergarten or a pre-kindergarten program. It's about 100 children, and no one's got to pay for it because it's federally funded, and it's an augment and supplement to school. And I'm not knocking it, because I think here you have a city and leaders who are saying, we recognize there's a problem, and we're trying to offer a solution. And it's a small solution, right? To me, it's like taking a teaspoon out of the ocean. You're not going to really notice the difference. 100 children is not going to make that big of an impact. It will to those 100 for sure, without a doubt. If you interview those parents or those grandparents, because let's be clear, we have a lot of people where the grandparents are raising the children, right? If you interview them, they're going to tell you how great it is because they are getting that immediate benefit. But if you look statistically, it's not going to be a bigger solution to solve. My take on how we can fix the North Las Vegas schools, right, is you can direct resources to a specific school. You want to put your business in North Las Vegas, Steve? Great, I'm all for it. Come on in. You need a little something. Okay, sure. There's always a give and take in everything. I should never give away the farm, but I should never believe that I'm going to give you nothing and you're going to give me everything. That's not going to happen. I need you because you can provide jobs, right? You need me because I have able-bodied people who will work at your place. You can't have, unless you have a place that's completely without people, right? You can't have a business without a workforce, and here's your workforce. So if you're going to come here and put your business here, and I'm going to work with you, the very first thing I'm going to say to you is, are you willing to be a community partner? Or do you just want to come here and put up your business and go, hey man, I'm giving you jobs and I don't need to give you anything else?
And what does that mean?
So a community partner means exactly this, right? Corporate partnership has been a big thing for a long time. And this is what corporate partnership is. Because your community is where I reside, I invest in that community. You can give me direct dollars, direct resources, right to specific schools. So Mojave is a school, Canyon Springs is a school, 2 high schools in North Las Vegas, right? I could say to someone like Amazon, who has their warehousing facilities there, because Lord knows we touted Amazon's in North Las Vegas. Amazon's in North Las Vegas. We got Amazon. Fanatics, there's a big TJ Maxx center that's over there. There's a lot of businesses in North Las Vegas a lot of people don't know are there, right? But where's my AWS cloud computing lab at Mojave? Why isn't it Amazon hasn't decided to partner with the North Las Vegas community and put a lab in one of our schools so that our children can learn cloud technology? That's the future. That's where a lot of these jobs are, right? We learned that Zoom works, by the way. I've been an advocate of it because I've sold it for years, and for decades I've been trying to sell it to everybody and they've been resisting it. And then all of a sudden COVID came along, and what moved technology forward fastest? COVID, because everybody got on Zoom type platforms right away. So there's a way for you to mentor these children. You can do it via Zoom protocol. Because they're AWS, which, by the way, AWS, for those that don't know, they're the cloud computing group of Amazon. They're the most dominant player in the space. Not AT&T, not any of the players that own and run and control the internet. AWS, which is controlled by Amazon, controls all the cloud storage data. They are the largest provider of it. Azure, which is owned by Microsoft, is the second, right? And then the percentage falls greatly. So just because you don't have that business entity here doesn't mean you don't own that business entity. That's what community partnership looks like. Direct investment, direct application, direct involvement, not indirect. You give it to CCSD and it goes into general fund, I have no idea where those funds go. Amazon goes, listen, I gave you $1 million. I didn't know it wasn't going to make it to your school. No, you can put the money directly at the
Sounds
school.
like the marijuana money.
That's a whole nother topic. But so that's what it means to me, and I believe in that. I believe it's important. I believe that you should value the communities in which you're doing business. Tire warehouse, put a facility there. Great. Hey, there's nothing wrong with being a delivery driver. They make a decent wage. They make a living wage, right? So here I am, a high school sophomore, junior, senior, sitting in school, learning the things I need to learn, but guess what I don't know? If I want to do that job, how do I get to that job? So why don't we have a bridge and a connection where we're interconnecting and making sure that you're a business partner in this community, you want future workers, they're right down the street. Educate them on what it is you do. Educate them on how they can get to be your next employee. Educate them. Be a part of solving your problem, which is the manpower problem. And if you're going to say the manpower problem is a problem because, well, you know, the education system, Nevada, especially Southern Nevada, Clark County, is low across the country, you can't get qualified and educated workers, well then you could say that all day long, but let me ask you a question. What are you doing to solve it? You got all these resources, right? We're talking about some pretty big companies with pretty deep pockets. Wouldn't mean much to them to do anything. Plus, we also know it's a tax break for them. But let's put that aside because I don't want to get in that part of their business. It's fine. If that's the rule, they should have that tax break. What I want to talk about is you have enough resources where I'm not coming to you and trying to take over a significant amount of money for you. If I came to Amazon and said, hey, I need you to put $3 million in 2 different high schools and create these labs and make sure that we have the education materials so that these students can learn these type of skill sets so they can move forward in the world and be prepared for jobs to be your future employees, what are we talking for a company like that, $3 million? We're way below sub 1% of their revenue, of their net revenue, right?
Let's talk infrastructure. How do you see the infrastructure in North Las Vegas? How are the roads?
Growing.
How are the buildings?
Getting better. Very new. The buildings are very new. Buildings are going up every day. Vacant lots are being cleared. New houses being built. You have to make sure that your building inspecting department, which I would assume is extremely overwhelmed at this point with the amount of building that is going on, is doing what they're supposed to do to make sure that builders aren't cutting safety corners. How you cut corners in your business, not my business. When it comes to safety, meaning that the structure is sound and the structure is safe, that's why cities have building inspectors. And so that needs to be assured. And I know I saw an article where there's some people who are dealing with a home builder right now in North Las Vegas. They're saying there's some challenges. And you know, that's unfortunate. But I think the city has a responsibility to make sure that when it comes to the safety aspect of it, they're holding those builders accountable and they're making sure they're doing their due diligence.
Well, how much of BLM land is in North Las Vegas?
That's a great question. I don't know the exact percentage. I know this state is pretty well controlled by BLM, okay, which was interesting when I got here because a gentleman told me and I was like, and he told me what it was. And I said, well, I know what the agency is. I just didn't know they were still in existence. From Chicago, we haven't heard BLM since the Indians.
As mayor, would you go to the federal government to purchase those land?
If it made sense. If I had a plan, right, and I had backing for the plan. So if I came with this great vision, like we talked about earlier, right, and I had created a plan to implement that vision, I'll go anywhere I need to go to get the funding and resources for it. Private, public, federal, state.
What would North Las Vegas' biggest attraction be? How would you as mayor influence businesses to be a part of North Las Vegas? How would you influence residents? Because you know California's been coming here rapidly. Mm-hmm. They sell their houses in California for millions of dollars, and they come here and they buy up a whole neighborhood. Here they pay cash for their house. How would you attract businesses and residents in North Las Vegas to grow North Las Vegas? What would you do? What would your pitch be?
So interesting you say that. So when I look over the bow of the boat, when I'm looking at North Las Vegas, I would say this: you don't need a pitch. It's growing already. They're coming in by droves. They're building. What I thought about was, hey, now that I've made the decision, because here's where I stand on this. Once I shook the first hand and looked in the first face and said I'm running for mayor for North Las Vegas, the only thing I can control from this point forward is whether I quit or not. Everything else is out of my control. So I have no desire, I have no plan, I will not quit. There will be no withdrawal because maybe I didn't raise enough money, or maybe this didn't happen or that didn't happen. Once I told someone, when I looked in their face and said, this is what I'm doing, to the bitter end, that's what I'm gonna do, right? So that is my decision, and that's what I'll do. So you don't have to influence people to come develop in North Las Vegas. They're already doing it. Now, what I said was, boy, I would love to see, and that's my feeling and my opinion. And so lately I've been trying to meet as many people, small business owners, neighbors, community, going out and knocking on doors. Yes, people are like, you're running for mayor? Exactly, and I'll ask you right to your face. Did the mayor come and knock on your door when he wanted your vote? Right, any mayor, not just this one, but any mayor, most don't, right? But that's okay. But I'm asking, what would you like to see? First, it's always, what do you like about living here? Because I don't want people just to start complaining right off the bat. There's a reason you live here. And if it's just because housing's affordable, that's a good reason. I like a deal, like anybody else, right? So I live in North Las Vegas because I think the housing is affordable. I can afford to live in other places. People tell me all the time, oh, with your money, don't try to count my money because there wouldn't be much to count. It's a short count. But the real focus is, you don't have to entice them, they're already coming. The trick is enticing a diverse group of people to fill the spaces that are already being built. And what I mean by that is this: light industrial is being built like nobody's business in North Las Vegas. California companies, there's a New York company that's getting ready to acquire a bunch of warehouse space. They're coming here and they're like, we're gonna build another 500,000 square foot of space, and bop, they're building. I don't need to go find them. I don't need to go ask them, they're coming.
How would you control the water though, that's being used to build?
Water's a whole nother issue, you're absolutely right. Water is a different issue. So how do I control the water? So what I've learned is that we have our own public facilities when it comes to sanitation, right? So we don't use the Clark County Water Reclamation System. We have our own reclamation system, North Las Vegas. We also have our own water. We don't use Las Vegas Valley water. We have North Las Vegas water. So then I would have to sit with the water department and say, where are we at as far as levels? I would have to talk to people like DRI, who those are the people who are the research scientists that talk about effective and efficient use of water. Again, I don't generally make statements or have opinions until I talk to people who's experienced in these areas and give suggestions. And then we look at, sometimes you may give me a suggestion that sounds great, but we don't have the resources to implement that, or that's not something we could truly control. So it was a great idea. What can we do close to that though? How can we get around that? So how do we go in and talk to the people who can give us the good advice on, listen, you're overbuilding, and so you're gonna have a water problem, and here's some of the solutions and challenges you can have to it. That would be how I would manage the water situation. But back to the building situation, that's the easy part. The hard part is, most of the people who want to fill those buildings are mostly warehousing companies. Some light manufacturing, but warehousing companies. How do I get my economic development team to work like salespeople, commission salespeople? Meaning, we want to attract these companies. How do we get involved with LVUGA? How do we make sure we're getting our, not fair share, but proportional share of all these companies from the nation, the globe, that want to come and relocate here in Southern Nevada for whatever the reasons are, and we have a great business climate, right? But how is my economic development team lining up? Are they third in line, fifth in line? Are they always letting Henderson's economic team get the first pick and the best pick? Are we actively pursuing and courting what we want in our town? Or are we waiting for the fax machine to spit off someone who wants a permit and go, hey, we got another one, right? And yep, they fit the criteria, let them in. So that's something I would be able to have a little more influence over than, say, getting a developer to come and build, let's say, a Class A office space, because that doesn't seem to be the space that's being built, nor is there interest to build that space in North Las Vegas at this point. So I don't want to swim upstream. I want to take advantage of the wins we have. I just simply want to reallocate those wins, like hydroponic farming. You talked about water. Well, we need food here, for sure. Growing food here is not that that great of an option, right? We don't have that type of land. And it takes a lot to use the land we have to grow food here, right? But hydroponic farming doesn't. It uses less water. It's much more efficient. They can grow more food in a shorter footprint. There you go. There's a tenant you can put in there, and you reduce the water strain.
Homelessness is always an issue. You had our state was busing homeless people to San Francisco until San Francisco sued. You got a municipality that was giving citations to homeless people and locking them up. Okay.
It's one way to say you got them off the street.
That was in the city of Las Vegas. They were doing that.
I think I read an article similar to that.
When you have homeless issues, you have a problem with sanitation because of tents here and garbage cans here and
garbage, human waste.
Yeah,
sure.
And most of the times you have problems with drug use, crack, and
a lot of the
meth.
homeless have mental issues. They have they have chemical dependency issues. Yes.
And then you have the mental part. And how as mayor, this is always it's always a problem for every single person that's elected. Homelessness is always a problem. Nobody seems to know how to fix it, and it can be an eyesore on a city. It can have people don't want to live here because of the homeless problems. Even here, at this building, we have homeless problems around here. Not as much as somewhere else, but we do have it.
Sure.
As mayor, how would you implement a plan to clean up the homeless problems that's in North Las Vegas?
Sure. Boy, that's a tough one. One of the things I read an article about, it seems that the court system is saying for petty crimes, trespassing, any crime that's $500 or less, they're trying to identify if the person has either mental needs, chemical dependency issues, and providing them the resources to keep them from being a recurring person in the system, right? And the reason they're selecting at that level makes sense because they seem to be the least of the problems. It's not violent crime. Listen, someone breaks your $300 whatever. Yes, it doesn't matter. It's a crime to you, and that sucks and it's horrible, right? But that's not the same as someone who's armed robbing or murdering or doing those type of things. So we can all be clear about that. So they already have some sort of program in place to try to reduce that number and getting them attached to resources. We have things like Veterans Village. We have a lot of resources now that we can tap into. So what I would definitely do is look at the resources that are available, figure out what their challenges are, right? And where they need help, and seeing where we may be able to elicit money to provide those type of solutions and help. Do I have a solution for the homeless problem as the mayor? No. But like most of the problems in the city, I won't have a solution for those problems. What I will do, though, is work with the right individuals to make sure I'm putting together a plan that seems sound and logic. What I can tell you from a me perspective is the thing that matters to me more than anything else is humanity and dignity. So what are we doing, right? And if we're doing that, does that leave the individual with their dignity? Are we treating them humanely, right? I understand it's a bad situation. I am in the middle of securing a commercial lease. As I've gone over to the place multiple times, there are homeless people close by there, right? I, like everyone else, am a human being, and as much as I'm talking about humanity and dignity, immediately I go, ooh, how is this going to impact my business, right? So truth is, and I'll say this in all fairness, shame on me, because I should be a human being first, not a capitalist first, right? But the truth is we got to pay for stuff. So, and I'm opening a business. I'm borrowing money and spending money, and I don't want to just throw it all down the drain. How is it going to impact my business? And then I looked and I watched. Nobody ever approached me. I've been over to the facility 7, 8, 9 times. They've been there every time. No one's ever walked up to my car and asked for anything. Right? They all seem to sit across the street or underneath the trees in the shade, and they stay away. And I never see them approach people for anything. Right? They walk along because there's a Subway and there's some place where the corner store, it's a convenience store, and they go in and get whatever they're getting and come out. So they're not approaching people or bothering people. Right? So they have a right to share the planet just like anybody else. And I looked at that and said, well, yeah, to your point, it's not the best visual. Right? But then, what's wrong with me? How is a human being not the best visual, not the best optics? They're not bothering anybody. So that's how I want to always make sure I approach the solutions is, can I be a good human being and leave them with their dignity and treat them as humanely as possible as I try to get them assistance and help and understanding? Not everybody really wants your help. Some people are homeless by choice, very few, but if that's their choice, I shouldn't be strong-arming them off the street.
True. But I'm sure the city of North Las Vegas has different ordinance
Mm-hmm.
that you could go to code enforcement
Sure.
to enforce a particular ordinance. For example, 2 houses from here, if you look at that house, you see the garage is all crushed up.
Garbage out in front of the
Garbage
house.
out in
Weeds
front,
everywhere.
weeds everywhere. There's mattress and box spring laying there.
So
So
you're
what
talking
did-
about a public health and a public safety issue.
So what did I do? I contacted my city my city council for this ward,
Sure.
took some photos, and sent it to him, so he could call up code enforcement.
Yep.
Gave the address so they could go and clean up that area, because this is a business, and people driving down the street to come to the business, I don't want them to have to see that, because it just
Sure.
it's a bad perception.
Well, whether
right?
it's a business or a residential neighborhood, it doesn't really matter. Public safety, public health and public safety. So it's not
Right.
it's a safety issue to have garbage piled up in front of your house.
Right.
It attracts rodents, and those rodents don't just stay at that house, so now they come to the neighbors' houses,
Right.
right? Get in their backyards. I would hate for someone's child to be bitten by a rodent because the neighbor
Right.
doesn't adhere to sanitary and health conditions, right?
So would you have your city manager enforce the ordinances and go to code enforcement and make sure that they're doing their job? Because I believe that a lot of the rundown neighborhoods in North Las Vegas, if you had a good code enforcement, they could probably clean that place up. So I guess what I'm asking is, how would you clean up an area that needs cleaning, that apparently code enforcement might have turned their back on that neighborhood and not clean up? Or the neighbors, how would you get the residents of that community to start getting involved in their neighborhood to report all these different code violations to the city of North Las Vegas, so they could go in there and start cleaning up these neighborhoods that we've been turning our backs on? How would you do that as mayor?
Certainly. So you and I talked about it earlier, right? A society has to have rules, has to have some sort of structure. If everyone's just roaming about doing whatever they want, it doesn't work. So if there are ordinances in place, and those ordinances are valid ordinances, they're fair ordinances, they're not undue burdening someone, right? It's a fair ordinance. It's just as equally fair to you as it is to your neighbor and everyone else. If it's undue burden on you and your neighbors are all getting a pass, well, that's not a good ordinance, right? So as long as it's an ordinance that's for the safety and the well-being of the community, we should take care of that. And yes, I would have code enforcement making sure they do their job. Now, to the point of them turning their back or turning a blind eye or doing this, that, and the other, resources are usually finite. They're never infinite. And resources are usually allocated towards, I'll use air quotes here, priority areas. right? And so I don't want to necessarily use wealthier, but the areas we deem more deserving of services are getting more attention. The areas we deem less deserving of services are getting the attention. So what I would do in a situation like that is look at what's my code enforcement staff? How am I staffed up? What do they have the capabilities of doing? And an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day or however we set them, because I know some government workers work 4 10s versus 5 8s, right? So what's that structure look like? What are my resources? Do I have room to add to the resources? If I can add manpower, because I got a manpower shortage, right? Then let's look at adding manpower. If we can't add manpower, how do we allocate the manpower we have as best as we possibly can? Goes back to my Pittsburgh example, right? I drew up a bad game plan, and it needed to be wiped clean, not just corrected. It needed to be wiped clean and started from scratch, and started with people who could give good advice about how to get it done. So maybe what needs to happen is maybe I only have X amount of resources in my ordinance department, right? And in my code enforcement department, and I need to walk in there and work with the leadership and go, what are the challenges you're facing? And try to figure out other leaders who can collaborate with them on a team and come up with solutions so that we can grid the city out and so that we can make sure that people are getting around the city as a whole. And we're not keeping resources unnecessarily targeted in areas and we're ignoring the other areas, but we're making the rounds. Now, maybe we only make the rounds here once a month and we make the rounds here twice a month or 3 times a month, and people go, well, that doesn't seem fair. The world's not a fair place. There's more resources over here, so they get a little more attention. But you won't be completely ignored, right? Back to the thing I said about making sure that people can text their mayor. Text is a real easy, convenient way of operating. People are already doing it. They can do it and be anonymous. If you want to see your city official, you can go right on your website, right on the city website, and you can click on the link that tells you how to schedule to see your city councilman or city mayor. And you have to go see them face to face. You have to call them face to face. And you have to be willing to stand up and show your face. If I give you a text line, you can tell me anything over that text line. You can share any information over that text line. Text also drives pictures. So I don't want to put the burden on you to have to tattle on your neighbors. That's a lot of pressure. If I'm reading my tea leaves right, you probably got a job. You probably got so much time at work and so much time for your family and so much time for your personal recreation. You probably didn't allocate any time for being the neighborhood watch.
But let me just stop.
But if you're willing to do it,
let me stop you right there because
Yeah.
see that's the problem, because people don't get involved.
True.
And these types of behaviors become normalized, just like in our judicial system, corruption
True.
amongst many judges in the family court division, and it's so huge that it's in some respect it's uncontrollable. But the good ones normalize the bad behavior because nobody does anything about it, and it becomes normalized. And while I'm saying that, if we don't have involvement with residents, then these behaviors become normalized because nobody is reporting it, nobody is doing anything about it. It's not being tattletale, it's helping to improve your neighborhood and better your society. That's what that is. It's just like when I go to the school board and I say, how are you going to get parents involved in their children's education? Because a lot of parents drop their kids off at school and say, hey, that's my 8-hour babysitter, I gotta go to work.
Right.
Or I got this, or I got that. They're watching my kid. But that's not how it's supposed to be.
No. Well, that's not what it is, but they just assume it.
We need to better a child's education, you have to have parental involvement. So to better a community and a neighborhood, you have to have residential involvement. Just like when I took the picture and I said it to the city council. So my question is, how would you get the residents of North Las Vegas to be involved in their community to make it a better place? Because city workers are not everywhere. They don't know whatever they can't see and do any. You have to be involved.
Right.
Just like cops has CIs on the streets to give them information against whatever. How would you get the residents? And one of the reasons, Nathan, a little off this particular subject, nobody knows who the hell you are.
Me?
Yeah. And you're not a career politician.
No.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm way over time here. So people could know who
And I appreciate you
who
for it,
Nathan
truly.
Atkins is, how, because like you said, you can't go somewhere and do an hour and expect to know anything. You have to give it a half a day to really know what's going on. So how would you get the residents involved in North Las Vegas? And when you get the residents involved in their community, they're also going to be involved in the voting process as well. Because they're going to be involved in a lot more than just the residents now, because now you open up their third eye, so to speak.
Yeah.
How would you get them involved in North Las Vegas?
So I'll say this: apathy is what I'll call it. It is very commonplace, right? We've become very apathetic, and we use a lot of reasons as to why to be apathetic, right? Some residents are going to get involved, and you don't have to get them involved. You're a perfect example. Maybe some of these other residents have just looked at it every day and turned a blind eye, but you spoke up. What I can tell you is I will always look for a way in which to make it easy for residents who want to be involved to be able to communicate their issues so we can try to support and solve their issues. We will look for, and when I say we, I'm not sitting here telling you I got all the answers. That's why I should be the mayor of North Las Vegas. There's no one person with all the answers. But what I'm open to is I'm open to ideas and I'm open to trying things. What I don't think is a good idea right up front is, well, I can't reward you for telling on your neighbor, because then I might cause myself a bigger problem than I'm looking for, because you're trying to catch $50 every chance you can, and you're sending that in. So I don't want to cause conflict.
I don't think they should be paid.
So what I don't want to do is I don't want to go, hey, I'm trying to get neighbors involved and I'm trying to create community awareness. And what I ultimately end up doing with a policy or program or with some sort of support program is cause more conflict in the community, right? It has to be organic. Neighbors have to organically want to make their community better, right? No one told you to share that information. It's innate within you, right? It's not innate within everyone. There are some people, though, you can spark it in. There are some people you will never spark it in. And so the answer to your question of how will I light that spark? How will I get the ones that aren't driven already, where I can't shut them up because they're sending me 50 pictures and they're calling me every day until I get it fixed, right? I don't need to motivate those people, right? But there are some other people who kind of would help too if they had an easy process to do it, right? That's, again, what I say about the text thing. I have to come up with some sort of solution that it's easy for the residents to be able to say, I want to speak up about my neighborhood and community. Also, when they speak up, here's what actually has to happen. The city has to respond and do something. Because if I can figure out a way to get you engaged and nothing comes of it, you're not going to stay engaged. You're going to turn it back off. So turning it on is a challenge. And I'm not telling you I have the actual answer for it. I'm also telling you I will work to find the answer for it. What I'm more concerned about is not just turning it on, keeping it on, so that it's a long-lasting effect. And it's not a short-term thing where I can show you data going, listen, when I sat in the seat, look at how many people I motivated to call in and tell about a problem, and we went over and cleaned up, blah, 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 blah. I'm not trying to kill you with data. The facts speak for themselves. You see a community change when you've lived in a place and it looked like this, and now all of a sudden it looks like that. No one has to go out and tout it. Everyone's talking about it. Everybody knows it. Man, they really cleaned that part of town up over there. And for me, that's the bigger trigger. Isn't necessarily how do you turn the residents on, it's how do you keep them turned on. And that is the city's job, right? Getting them motivated is a challenge. They have to be part of that motivation. But what the city has to make sure they do is keep them motivated. And the only way you keep them motivated is being responsive, right? I prefer proactive, but in all cases you can't be. At a minimum, be reactive when your citizens are reaching out to you, when your residents are calling out to you, and it's a valid concern. you need to make sure that you're responding. And that responding could be, thank you very much for sending us this information, we'll look into it. And we may not be able to get to it for a week or two, giving you a timeline to tell you, we're gonna need 2 to 3 days before we can get somebody out there, letting you understand that not only did we hear you, not only are we gonna respond, but here's what the response is gonna look like. And that's not a difficult thing to do. That's an easy thing to do. We can implement that all day long. And then getting out there and responding. And then responding back to you and going, thank you, Mr. Sanson, for doing that. We went out, we saw what you saw. We've already sent a notice to the homeowner, and that homeowner has X amount of days to respond. We will be following up with that homeowner in those many days. Thank you very much. We appreciate citizens like you. Please continue to help us make our city a great city. Now you know what's going on, and we haven't broken any rules. I haven't violated anybody's privacy by telling you that we've contacted the homeowner. You have no idea who the homeowner is, although you can go look it up, it's public record, right? And I have not done anything wrong by telling you whatever the standard ordinance or code is, because we're following it. What I've done as a disservice to you, though, is if you took the time to tell me, and I have no apparatus whatsoever to respond to you, so you feel like I've done something, so you feel like I've engaged and followed up, so you feel like I've made the effort, because you have to feel it. And when I say you feel like it, doesn't mean I'm just making you feel good but not doing anything. I could be doing stuff and you didn't see it. I sent somebody out, but it wasn't the day you were around to see them when they were out. So as far as you're concerned, I still haven't done anything. Then I could tell you, oh, on this day and that and the other, the inspector was out there. Oh, and this happens. So just the way Amazon lets you know when your packages are coming, we have those tools. We should be able to get citizens, get residents, the information to go, we've heard you, here's what we're doing, and communicate those responses. I think that will be a spark that's needed in a community, because you're usually a neighborly type person if you care about your community. So you probably talk to the person over here and the person down there, and you're responding back saying, hey, the new city structure responded right away when I talked to him. Your neighbor goes, yeah, the other day I saw a city car that was out here taking a picture. And now, right, you believe your city government is doing what you expect them to do. And I don't have to encourage you anymore to care about your community, because you see I care as much as you care. Now it's mutual concern, and that'll be the spark. The key is continuously doing what needs to be done so you don't lose your motivation and your ambition.
So what about this? I didn't mean to cut you off,
No worries.
but I have a lot to say about that point, right? So being the mayor, you're going to have a lot of things to oversee. You're going to have a lot of issues, right? And you talked about looking at the whole picture, right? Mm-hmm. What about having a website, right, with transparency, where you get to see all these issues? You get to see everybody typing in, if it's a dirty yard, if it's, the homeless, right? Everybody gets to see it, right? Not just you. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets to see it. And then below it, you see how many days ago did somebody report. A status report, but then you see what was the response, right?
Right.
Would you be open to something like that?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be open to taking a look at that. I mean, again, we're talking about public information. This should always be public information. This isn't private information. So if we don't have anything like that in place, I think that's a great idea. It's just a matter of how do we implement it, can we put it up, and how do we make sure we manage it appropriately, right? Because I don't want to give you a feel good or look good. I want to give you something that's true. Those statuses are accurate. We're updating those statuses on time, and we're truly being transparent and putting that information out. And I know it's capable, right? Because we have the technology to easily do it. It's just getting it implemented. I just don't know what the back end systems in the city government is. And this is something I understand because, one, in my field of technology, I've sold to the government quite often, right? And even with major corporations. So there's legacy platforms and systems you have to be very conscientious of that, yes, this is an easy solution and fix, but if it doesn't bolt on or connect to what they have, well, then maybe they might have to invest in replacing the whole entire system. And so if it's going to cost $400 million to be able to put up that simple little website and make it do what it needs to do, that might not be the best use of the funds, right? But if it's a solution that can be easily implemented, absolutely. Why wouldn't we give it consideration and thought?
So I believe, right, I can tell you, you're a very smart individual. And, I think that me and you both know that I can create something, have it created, should I say, with $1,000, maybe even less, right? But so it's definitely not going to be in the $400 million, it's definitely not going to be $400 million. It's not going to be $100 million. But what I'm saying is, as long as there's transparency, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's one thing to talk a good game, and it's another thing, to action speaks louder than words, that's right? So it seems like you're going to do all this, right? We like, definitely, I'm sure Steve likes what you're talking about. So, but we want to see, right? The citizens of North Las Vegas would like to see, how is this, did you really take action on this? Are you up for transparency? Are you up for, it's going to take a great thinker to tackle the homelessness, right? It's going to take a great thinker, to think about the homeless when they do go to jail, right? And remember, from what I hear, when you go to jail, the jail gets a certain amount of money per individual, right? But I think what you talked about earlier, I want to touch base on is that a lot of these homeless have mental issues, right? So instead of, them sending them to a psychologist, that maybe works for the jail, and they take these people that are really crazy and they don't do nothing about it, and, they keep them locked up, or, they'll give them 6 months, they'll give them 3 days, whatever it is, Let's talk about, what would you do to, help with, the homeless that have, disabilities, or the homeless that are, have a mental illness, instead of locking them up. What do you think we should do about that?
Wow, that's a full question, and there's a lot of questions within questions on that one. Well, one of the things I would say to you originally is I don't know if it's necessarily going to take a great thinker to solve the homeless problem. I think we have a lot of great ideas already in place. Exactly. I don't think what's happening is we're supporting the great ideas, right? Simply because it doesn't support the agendas, or their voices aren't being heard because they know not to speak up, because they know that the leadership that they work for, don't say anything about that. We're already doing whatever we're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think it really needs to be this great thinker. I think we've got a lot of great solutions and a lot of great ideas out there. I think what we need to do is we need to get leaders who are more focused on finding the solutions and opening up the channels of communication so that these ideas can come to surface, and then implementing them and putting them to work. So I've said it several times since we've been sitting here. You have a vision, you create a good plan, and then you empower the people to make it happen. As technologically advanced as we've become, let's never forget, people make things happen. Yeah. Right? All the data in the world doesn't make stuff happen. If people don't take that data and implement the data in the way in which it can make a change, nothing happens. I can have data coming out my ears and nothing ever changes. It's the people who implement that data. It's the people who understand that data, right? And put that data to work to make sure something happens. So my focus more than anything else is empowering the smart people we already have within the city. I'm willing to bet everything I have, which really isn't a big bet because there's not a whole lot. But for me, it would be a big bet because it's everything I have, that within the city of North Las Vegas, we have a whole bunch of, and I'll say line workers just because line and staff is an easy term to use. When I went through grad school, you use it as just a generic, right? I don't mean line as in they're in a factory, because we all know that they're doing office work, most of them. Not all of them, though. We have engineers and we have a lot of different folks that have specialized skills, so they're specialties, they're not generals. But there's plenty of folks in the city right now that have great ideas how to solve the problems. Heck, they do the job every day. Why am I asking their director or the vice president of the group? They don't know anything. They just put a report together to come talk to me. I know that. Now, I can either as a leader sit here and convince myself that, oh, no, this is the way it is and this is the way it's supposed to be, or I can get smarter and go, great. So where did this report come from? How did this report get here? Or I could simply go, great, I appreciate your report. They're here on time, and do what I call skip levels. And skip levels is you go a level down or 2 levels down and you talk to the individual. Now you have to make sure that people feel confident and comfortable, that their job's not on the line, that there's going to be no retaliation, that no one's going to cause them harm or problem. You have to create ways in which people can send communication through the leadership channels without there being any sort of retribution. So it has to be anonymous. Has to be anonymous, right? Listen, I'm in corporate America. We take these surveys all the time. And they're like, hey, these surveys, they're anonymous. Don't worry about it. We need everybody to take them. And then you know what happens? We start putting pressure on our people going, listen, only 36% of your people have responded to this. Get your people responding to this survey. Well, wait a minute. How do you know only 36% of my people responded to the survey if it was anonymous? Well, because we can know that at the end of the day, they know who responded and how they responded. It ain't as anonymous as it seems. Right? Not only that, you put the survey out to get my feedback. My feedback is, I don't want to answer this. So forcing me to answer it is only reinforcing more of what you already want to hear, because then I'm only going to tell you what you want to hear. It's creating an environment in a city where people don't feel like, oh, this is the way it always works and no one's going to care what I have to say or no one's going to listen to me. I'll guarantee you a million great ideas sitting right inside of that city right now that are just going to waste every day, right? And the fact is, John Lee could have taken advantage of all of them, right? But there's only so much resources he has and there's only so much he can do at a time. Empowering the people to feel comfortable to be open and being able to share that information and then creating realistic plans. Again, I agree with you. I think it's a very easy plan to have the transparency website that you talked about. It's not going to be that difficult to implement it. What I'm saying, though, because I'm always conscious of the fact that until you have all the facts, you can't just blindly say, oh, this is easy to do. The reporting mechanism that it may feed into may be a legacy mechanism that doesn't interact. So you may not have what's called an API that'll interface and make it easy for it to do. And now if you have to spend a bunch of money to fix that, well, then now that changes the dynamic. It was a great idea until the next thing you know, you needed to put 100,000 to 200,000. I use 400 million as an extreme, but even if we're talking a few $100,000, what's the benefit versus the cost? And every business leader has to make that decision. And if they don't, it's hard for them to stay in business, right? Cities have to make that decision as well. And a city leadership has to make that decision. And as far as the span of responsibility, I don't think the mayor has a big span of responsibility. I think the mayor has a big crew of people to take care of that responsibility really easy. You know what the mayor's span of responsibility really is? Putting the right people in place, trusting in those people, and supporting those people. That's the mayor. That's really any senior leader's job, is to make sure you get the right people in place, right? Empower those people, and then trust in those people, and show them you support them. And if you do that, people will deliver for you beyond your wildest dreams.
So that's true. The only issue with that, though, that I see is there's already so much corruption going on, right? So it's not that you're coming in and you're putting in, you're not putting anybody on the city council. You're not, there's so much corruption in the courts, especially in family courts and stuff like that, how do you fix everything, right? Because you got to remember, if they're already corrupted, you can't just come in and say, hey, you can't pay him $1 million and say, hey, don't be corrupt no more, So how do you fix that?
Well, let's be fair. If we're talking true corruption, you can fix true corruption. You just have to uncover it, and then you have to be willing to do something about it, right? So the truth is as the mayor, he probably can't oust anybody. But what the mayor can do is go, I found out that here was a payment that's being given and this is inappropriate, and you submit it through the right channels and you make sure that you make it public and you make it known. And so the person who actually has to do the ousting, which, let's be fair again, that's not the mayor. They're not going to be able to be the one who ousts. I can sit here and pontificate and I can blow smoke up your skirt all day long and tell you, oh yeah, I'm in charge of everything. So if I see that, I'm going to rip it right out of there. Why? Because that's what people want to hear me say. And they're like, that's our guy, he's gonna do it. And then the truth is I
don't got a skirt.
That's all right. It's a silly saying we use in sales. But the truth is, later on, they don't see anything happen and they go, well, you said you were gonna, well, you never had that power in the first place. And so you're right, they don't know who I am. And here's who I am. I'm not gonna tell you I'm gonna do something I don't have the power to do. Or if I'm not sure what my powers are, I'm going to find out what they are first. And I'm going to communicate with you, be transparent, be open, and make sure you know, here's what I'm capable of doing, and then I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And you're probably not going to like it, and you may like it, and someone else, someone on the fence. And that's just the way the world works. But as long as I know at the end of the day, I was good in intent, and I used a fair and an appropriate process to try and do what was right, One person can do what was right all along. We called it fighting the windmills, right? Don Quixote tilted at the windmills all the time. The truth is you are a cog in the system. And so if I sit here and go, yeah, I'm gonna clean up all the corruption, I'm gonna fix all of this, I'm gonna fix all of that, just give me your vote. And then I ain't gonna be able to do anything because I just lied to you and told you all this other stuff. But what we can do though is we can start having a leader who will practice what leaders should practice. And what we hope for more than anything else is for that to become infectious and to catch on and to spread and for other leaders to start going, look at that. This leader's doing the right thing and good things are happening. Maybe we should start doing the right thing because we can start seeing good things happen. A lot of good leaders out here who want to do the right thing, they're afraid to do the right thing because, well, there's this system over here that if I go this way, I might not get reelected or I might not happen again. I'm not running for perpetual reelection. I'm running because I think the city of North Las Vegas can step out of the shadows of some of the history you talked about. There's some other history I know about it too that I'd like to see it emerge from. But it can step out of the shadows of where it's at and it can stand out and become the city that it should be. And right now, it's a good city. I'm not planning on moving, but it's not the city it can be. And that's because no one's taken the hedge off and leading it with that intent.
Well, I wanna end this segment with voter integrity and getting people to the polls.
Okay.
And I know, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, he knows how to rally people.
He does.
He knows how to get people to the polls.
He knows how to figure out what works and focusing on doing that versus doing what you want to do.
Right.
He looked at what's going to get the response, and let's put our energy and effort in that direction and get the response.
So with that said, in North Las Vegas, history of going to the polls is not very good. Okay.
I would call it anemic.
It's hard to motivate North Las Vegas residents to go to the voting booth.
The last voting cycle, the mayor won with 6,000 votes. There are 8,438 votes, if I remember correctly, total
Now,
to put a mayor in office and to vote for a mayor to be in office. That of a citizenry of 230,000 people.
yeah. So you got the small minority that's telling the majority who we should put in office. With that said, in North Las Vegas history, there was a city council race, and both candidates had the same amount of votes.
I've heard about this.
So this is how they decided who's going to be your city leader. It wasn't a special election.
No.
It was who had the highest card, because we're in Las Vegas.
To be fair, so what you're saying is they took a deck of cards and the old game of high card wins, and so someone randomly turned up a card for person A, whether flip a coin was you go first or I go first, and then they turned up for person B, and whoever had the highest card, bingo, you have now won.
Become the
Yes.
city council.
I'm very familiar with that. I've heard about it. It actually baffled me. It blew my mind. And the first question was, is that our process? Because if it's our process, I can't say much about it other than my opinion. What I can say, though, is I find that to be a less than appropriate process. And there should be a much more thoughtful process than simply the turn of a card or the flip of a coin, or when we're deciding something as important as this. I don't consider the Super Bowl to be that important. So flip a coin if you would like as to who will get the ball first or not. I'm okay with that. Determining who's going to vote on things that impact your education, your employment, your livelihood, well, we probably should be a little more definitive in our process other than flip of a coin.
I'm glad you brought up the Super Bowl, and that's a sport, okay?
It's entertainment.
It doesn't determine your life
No, it's
one way or
entertainment.
another unless you're a gambler and you lose your finances because of it. But in a Super Bowl, if both teams were tied There was no high card draw.
No, they both get the ball at a certain.
You go in overtime and you play again. Yeah. So why is a elected position as a city council race so less important than a football game?
It shouldn't be, and again, that obviously has to be the policy, because if it wasn't, I'm sure lawsuits would have come down. I'm sure a lot of people would have taken an approach against it. What I'm saying, though, is whether it's the policy or not, I would be inclined to go, well, who ultimately decides it, and where do we have to go to have a conversation about changing this? Because this isn't something, in my opinion, appropriate for determining something so important. As to your earlier statement, though, the few people are deciding for the majority. What I'll say is this: the majority is allowing the few to decide, because when you registered to vote, right, it's on you to vote, right? You get your light bill and you pay your light bill, or you don't. You have to pay the light bill. It shouldn't be the light bill's job to come motivate you to pay the light bill. They motivate you by turning your lights off if you don't pay it after a while, right? That's a given.
Or fees.
Right? Or fees on top of it, right? But so the truth is it's not that the majority are dictating what the majority are doing. They are, because the majority's giving them the power.
Exactly.
They're empowering.
So how would you motivate people to the polls?
And that is my biggest push right now. That's what I'm in the process of working on. So everyone tells me, oh, it's super early, it's super early, it's super early.
It's never early.
I say it's
always late.
I say it's super early for the establishment candidates. Fine. For someone like me, who needs to figure out a strategy beyond just this is what we do and here's how we chase and all this other stuff, nonsense. I have to figure out how to go motivate those voters to vote. How I'm doing it right now is I've started small, because really it's just me. I don't have a big war chest and I'm not super wealthy, so I can't hire a bunch of people to go out here and do all these things. I started by going to independent businesses. Sugar Daddy's is a cigar lounge in town that recently opened. He agreed to sit down with me and tell me what he liked about North Las Vegas as far as doing business, also as a resident. And he also told me some of the things he'd like to see changed. I'm sitting down with Teaspoon, which is a bakery in North Las Vegas. I'm sitting down with the tutoring center where we've sent our kid, right? How does business impact? I've got a few residents who I've met that live there that have been willing to sit down with me and share information. And little by little by little by little. Now, so we're getting ready to get out of these triple digit numbers as far as heat. I have to carve out in my day, every day, an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours that I take from doing my work and running my business and doing all my other stuff, and actually physically go knock on doors and shake hands and talk to people directly. And I also have to motivate people willing to volunteer to help me do that. And how do I get them motivated to vote? I show physical presence, and I let them know that there's someone out there who actually wants their vote and cares for their vote. That's the first step. Backpack drives, they work all day long. They'll all show up for a free backpack. They'll go to the pool party and have a good time. And I'm not saying cities shouldn't have those type of events, but they don't generally vote for you because of it. They just show up and take the free goods and they go home, right? They vote for you because you truly came out and said, how can I earn your vote? Everyone I've ever talked to about anything since I've started, the conversation is always, how do I earn your vote? Not how do I get your vote? Not how will you vote for me? How will I earn your vote? I should earn your vote. You should believe in me, and you should vote for me because you believe I will actually go and do something.
Yeah. Well, I know, Gianno, you don't have any more questions, right?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Atkins, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Oh, I appreciate you, brother, all the time.
If you could look into the camera.
I certainly can.
And tell folks why they should go to the voting booth and put Nathan Atkins in office as the next mayor of North Las Vegas. And folks, if you don't know, Mayor John Lee is vacating the mayor's seat to run for governor. So that seat's going to be completely empty. And Nathan Atkins is one of the candidates that has announced to run for North Las Vegas mayor. So if you could tell folks how they could go to the voting, why they should go to the voting booth and put you in office and your point of contact.
Sure, certainly. So point of contact's really simple. Website is Atkins, Atkins, 4, the number 4. NLV.com, and that's the website, and you can get my bio and my background and learn, and you can volunteer and do all those things. The reason why you should select me is simple. I am a resident in the community, have lived in the community for a long time. My family's lived in the community for a long time, and I am looking at the community from the perspective of, and you'll see this on my site, live, work, and play. Does North Las Vegas offer the residents the option to live, work, and play? Are our roads improved properly? Are our schools getting the type of support that they need from the business leaders in the community? Do we have the job opportunities? And are we creating small businesses, which is valuable to every community, right? Play, do we have the places to shop and find entertainment within our city, or are we constantly leaving our city and spending our dollars in the Southwest and Summerlin and downtown and on the Strip and never spending the money back in the city we live in? So I'm telling you, you want someone like me who is going to be focused on running the city, not necessarily exactly like a business, but mostly like a business. It's going to be focused on the services and functions that a city should provide. Am I doing those jobs for you? And do you have a way in which to communicate with me, which is very important. If you don't think it's important, it's extremely important that your leadership should be accessible and you should be able to be heard. So all you have to do is go to Atkins, Atkins, the number 4, NLV.com. You can learn all about my live, work, and play strategy, and you can learn a lot more about me, but furthermore, volunteer. Connect with me. Thank you, Steve.
Well, Nathan Atkins, thank you so much for being on the program. John Amato, thank you so much for co-hosting with me.
Definitely. No problem.
Folks, that's Nathan Atkins, a candidate for North Las Vegas mayor. And I hope you enjoyed this segment of Veterans in Politics. I hope it was informative and will give you a better idea and a better respect of the seat and the candidate running for it. This is Steve Sanson and Gianno Amato of Veterans in Politics. Until next time.